It was 8:24 p.m. on December 18, 2022. Natalie McNally, 32, was home alone. She opened YouTube and saw her boyfriend live streaming. He was wearing a Santa hat, drinking beer, playing games, and laughing with thousands of viewers. Natalie suspected nothing amiss. After all, looking at the screen, it appeared as though Stephen McCullagh was at home. But in reality, he wasn't there at all. Even more chilling, just 27 minutes later, a camera captured a man approaching Natalie's house. At around 8:51 p.m., the man broke into her home. Meanwhile, Stephen's livestream continued. He was still laughing, still playing games, still leading thousands of people to believe he was somewhere else entirely. But Natalie had no idea that the man she saw on the screen had pre-recorded that video days in advance. That night, Natalie was murdered. And when the police began their investigation, the very live stream, what seemed like the perfect alibi, became the clue that led them straight to the truth. Because Stephen had forgotten one thing: video can deceive the eye, but data cannot. The live stream that never happened. It was Sunday evening, December 18, 2022, just a week before Christmas. On YouTube, a man wearing a Santa hat sat in front of the camera. He drank beer, played video games, chatted with his audience, and laughed, acting as if it were just an ordinary night. Thousands of people were watching him. Nothing in the frame suggested they were witnessing anything unusual. The man was Stephen McCullagh, a YouTuber known as VoteSaxon07. His content centered on video games, pop culture, Doctor Who, robot toys, and a few rather niche interests. That evening's broadcast was promoted as a special Christmas-themed gaming livestream. But there was a problem. In reality, Stephen McCullagh was not sitting in front of the camera that night. The video had been recorded days earlier. While thousands of viewers thought they were seeing Stephen relaxing at home, a woman about 17 miles, roughly 27 kilometers, away was lying in her own home after suffering a horrific attack. That woman was Natalie McNally. She was 32 years old and 15 weeks pregnant. And the man appearing on the screen, the one Natalie believed was at home that evening, was her boyfriend. He was also the father of the child she was carrying. Natalie grew up in Craigavon, Northern Ireland, in a family of 4 children. She was the only daughter and had 3 older brothers. Her family affectionately called her Nats. Natalie had lived with diabetes since childhood, but those close to her never saw it as a reason to limit her life or hold her back. Her brothers described Natalie as intelligent, strong, and independent, someone who always knew exactly what she wanted. She loved animals and music and was a huge fan of the band The Killers. She also held strong views on equality, women's rights, and social issues. After studying law at Queen's University, Natalie worked in communications and marketing for TransLink, Northern Ireland's public transport authority. She had a solid career, a home of her own, and a loving family and circle of friends. And by late 2022, she believed she had something even more wonderful: a baby on the way. Natalie had already chosen names for the child. If it were a boy, she wanted to name him Dean, and if it were a girl, she had picked the name Zara. Her family was overjoyed. This would be their first grandchild. A new chapter was opening for Natalie. Yet, she had no idea that the man by her side was concealing a completely different plot. The most chilling aspect of this story lies not only in the killer's attempt to flee, but also in how he constructed a fabricated world to convince thousands of people he was somewhere else. It was a world built on images, sounds, and the manipulation of time, and constructed upon the very trust of the woman he was plotting to murder. The man on the screen, August 2022. Natalie met Stephen McCullagh on the dating app Bumble. At the time, Stephen was 36 years old. He presented himself as a somewhat eccentric man with a passion for robots, video games, and pop culture. He had built a significant audience on YouTube, around 37,000 subscribers, hundreds of videos, over 15 million views. This image stood in stark contrast to the man he was later revealed to be in court. The first messages between Natalie and Stephen were exchanged on August 7th. Their relationship developed quite rapidly. They chatted about work, pets, personal interests, and life in general. They also visited each other's homes. By October, Stephen had met Natalie's family. He was no longer a stranger, but had become part of her family's life. When Natalie became pregnant, Stephen nicknamed the baby Little Squish. He even discussed the possibility of them living together. From the outside, it appeared to be a love story reaching a new milestone. However, after Natalie passed away, investigators began to examine Stephen's past. An ex-girlfriend testified in court. She described a completely different Stephen, not the humorous man from YouTube or the robot enthusiast, but someone who was controlling, highly possessive, and prone to making threats. She accused him of physically assaulting her and secretly recording their counseling sessions. Stephen denied these allegations. However, that testimony became part of the picture the prosecution wanted the jury to see. The image of a seemingly harmless man who harbored an intense desire for control in his relationships. By November, Natalie was 15 weeks pregnant. She had scheduled an ultrasound and her family was already aware of the baby. She planned to reveal the fetus's gender at Christmas. Everything should have been filled with joy. But according to the prosecution, by that time, Stephen had begun to harbor suspicions and jealousy. Prosecutors alleged that Stephen had access to Natalie's phone. He knew the passcode and had read messages exchanged between her and her ex-boyfriend. What he read reportedly ignited his jealousy and caused him to lose control. However, rather than confronting Natalie directly, Stephen allegedly began devising a plan, one that required two elements: committing murder and fabricating an alibi. Around December 14 or 15, Stephen recorded a video lasting over 6 hours. He wore a Santa hat, drank beer, played video games, and chatted on camera. The video was staged to create the impression that viewers were watching a genuine live stream, even though Stephen had actually pre-recorded and saved the footage. His goal was to make the video appear as if it were being broadcast live at a later time. Notably, he wove explanations into the video for details that might otherwise arouse viewer suspicion. He mentioned his inability to interact with the online chat box and noted that he was not using his phone. These seemingly random details would later become pivotal elements of the case. Stephen was not merely recording a video. According to prosecutors, he was creating a digital mask, and that mask was intended for use on the very night Natalie died. The nights Natalie didn't return. December 18, 2022. A Sunday. The entire UK had its eyes fixed on the World Cup final between Argentina and France. Natalie, too, was spending time with family. That afternoon, she stopped by Stephen's house briefly before heading out. She went to her parents' home in Craigan to watch the match with them. Little did anyone know, it was one of the last times they would see her alive. After the game, Natalie returned to her own home in Silverwood Green, Lurin. Around 4 p.m., Stephen announced a live stream scheduled for that evening. At approximately 5:57 p.m., he texted Natalie to let her know he was about to start the stream. Natalie replied that she might watch it later. 3 minutes later, at 6 p.m., the video began playing on YouTube. Stephen appeared on screen. Wearing a Santa hat, he drank, played games, and chatted. To any viewer, everything seemed completely normal. But at that moment, Stephen was no longer at home. His phone was turned off too. Around 6:36 p.m., a surveillance camera near Stephen's house captured an image of someone carrying a bag. Nearly an hour later, a bus camera recorded a man with his face covered, wearing a hat and gloves. This person was heading toward Lurin. According to the timeline presented by the prosecution, the man was walking toward Natalie's house. Meanwhile, Stephen was sitting at home playing video games and live streaming on YouTube. At 8:24 p.m., Natalie logged onto YouTube. She watched her boyfriend's live stream. She saw Stephen and heard his voice. Seeing the familiar room, she believed he was at home. She had no reason to think otherwise. And that is precisely what made this moment so chilling. According to the prosecution, just moments later, the man Natalie believed to be at home appeared right at her doorstep. At approximately 8:51, he allegedly broke into her house. The events that followed were horrific. Prosecutors allege that Natalie was attacked over the course of about 40 minutes. She was beaten, strangled, and stabbed multiple times. Forensic experts documented 48 distinct injuries on her body. One of the most heartbreaking details was that Natalie was not fighting for her life alone. She was pregnant. Baby Dean never got the chance to be born. At approximately 9:31 p.m., the man left the house. He then took a taxi near a bar in Lurin. By this time, he had changed his clothes. The taxi drove him back to Lisbon. Surveillance cameras captured the passenger throwing 2 objects over a fence. At 11:16 p.m., Stephen's phone became active again. Meanwhile, the YouTube live stream was still running. A video recorded days earlier was playing, creating the impression that Stephen had never left the house. Around 12:05 a.m., the video was manually turned off. Afterward, Stephen sent a message to Natalie. The next day, he continued to message her, asking if she was okay. But Natalie could not reply. She had died right inside her own home. On December 19th, Stephen arrived at Natalie's house. He called 999, identifying himself as her partner, and feigned shock upon discovering the body. Police arrested him on suspicion of murder. However, when investigators reviewed the live stream, the evidence seemed to point to a different conclusion. It appeared Stephen had been at home. There were thousands of viewers, and a video spanning several hours. This undermined the initial case against him. On December 20th, Stephen was released. A few days later, Natalie's family was informed that he was no longer considered a suspect. Yet, the police were unaware that the seemingly perfect live stream concealed a secret, and technology itself would prove to be the key to exposing it. The deceptive live stream. After Natalie's death, Stephen did not disappear. On the contrary, he appeared in places where few would expect him. On Christmas Day, he visited Natalie's parents' home to offer his condolences and was treated like a grieving relative. Later, on January 26, 2023, Stephen visited the McNally family home. Upon leaving, he realized he had left his phone behind. He returned about 40 minutes later, but the phone was still recording. Prosecutors argued that this was no accidental oversight. They contended that Stephen intentionally left the device behind to eavesdrop on the McNally family's discussions about the case and to see if they suspected him. If true, the act revealed a chilling need for control. He didn't just want to know what the police were thinking. He also wanted to know what the victim's own family was thinking. On January 28th, more than 1,000 people gathered in Lurin to honor Natalie's memory. Stephen was there too, a man standing amidst the crowd, mourning the woman he had once called his partner. Meanwhile, behind the scenes of the investigation, cybercrime experts began examining his devices. They discovered something that thousands of YouTube viewers could not see. That live stream had not actually been live. It was a pre-recorded video. Digital forensic experts examined the file data, creation dates, save times, traces of deletion, system logs, and even the digital trash bin. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to come together. The video was created about 4 days before the incident and subsequently broadcast on YouTube on December 18th, appearing as though it were happening in real time. In the early hours of December 19th, after Natalie had died and Stephen had returned, the video file was deleted and then permanently removed from the trash folder. For investigators, this was a breakthrough discovery. Stephen's entire explanation hinged on a single factor: his claim that he was at home. If the stream had truly been live, it would have served as ironclad proof. However, if it was pre-recorded, that alibi would completely collapse. On February 1st, 2023, police confronted Stephen. Initially, he appeared incredulous, arguing that because the video appeared on YouTube, it must have been a live stream. However, his story later changed. Stephen admitted the video had been filmed beforehand, but maintained that he was at home on the night Natalie died. He suggested that another killer might have deliberately staged the evidence to cast suspicion on him. The defense pointed the finger at Natalie's ex-boyfriend. Yet, by that time, the police possessed far more than just a video clip. They had surveillance footage, phone data, records of bus and taxi travel, evidence of a change of clothes, a detailed itinerary, and that very same fake live stream video. On February 2nd, 2023, Stephen McCullagh was formally charged with Natalie's murder. The investigation had been a long, arduous process, but the most critical question remained: who exactly had broken into Natalie's home that night? And why did Stephen go to the trouble of staging a fake live stream lasting more than 6 hours? The final answer will be presented to the jury. Irrefutable facts. The trial began in February 2026 at the Crown Court in Belfast. Over the course of 5 weeks, the jury heard a vast amount of evidence. Prosecutors reconstructed a detailed timeline, From the days leading up to the incident to the afternoon of December 18th, marking the start of the live stream, and the moment a man appeared on a street-level camera. Next came the period during which he allegedly broke into Natalie's home, left, returned to Lisbon, and finally, the moment Stephen's phone became active again. The defense argued that the case relied primarily on circumstantial evidence. They raised the possibility of another killer. They emphasized that no witness had actually seen Stephen murder Natalie, and Stephen himself did not testify in court. However, the problem with his explanation was that it had to contend with too many pieces of the puzzle: a pre-recorded video, movements captured on camera, a phone turned off and then on again, a taxi, a change of clothes, and actions taken after the incident. Each individual detail could be disputed, but when pieced together, the prosecution argued, they formed a complete picture. The jury deliberated for over 2 hours. On March 23, 2026, they delivered their verdict, a unanimous guilty finding. Stephen McCullagh was convicted of the murder of Natalie McNally. In the courtroom, Natalie's family burst into tears. Her brothers speak of the sister they adored, the heart and soul of the family, an expectant mother who should have been celebrating Christmas with her loved ones, who should have known whether she was carrying a boy or a girl and chosen a name for her child. She should have been cradling baby Dean, if that was indeed the name she had chosen for her son. Yet, all those future possibilities vanished overnight. What makes the Natalie McNally case particularly striking is not merely the manner of her murder, but the fact that the killer, as determined by the court, attempted to use technology to manipulate public perception after the crime. A camera, a pre-recorded video, an online platform. Thousands of viewers. All were used to fabricate a false image, that of a man sitting at home, someone who could not possibly have been at the scene of the crime. Yet technology has a weakness. It remembers. A video can be deleted, an account can be closed, words can be altered, but data always leaves a trace, such as a file creation date. Timestamps, device history, location data, traffic cameras, bus cameras, taxi records, seemingly disparate elements that can ultimately be pieced together into a single timeline. And when that timeline fails to align with a suspect's story, the lie begins to unravel. The case also offers a chilling lesson about the digital age. We often equate a live stream with actual presence. Seeing someone on screen at 8 p.m., we automatically assume they are there at that moment, hearing the voice, seeing the face, seeing the room. We trust what unfolds before our eyes. But a video is not a person. A video could have been filmed yesterday, a week ago, or even longer, and without carefully checking the data behind the screen, viewers might believe in a moment that never actually happened. For Natalie, that live stream held a particularly heartbreaking significance. She watched it that evening. She saw her boyfriend on the screen, and she believed he was safe at home. She likely didn't realize that the man she saw on screen was not the same man existing in her life at that moment. She didn't know that the footage had been prepared days in advance. She saw only the person she trusted, and it was that very trust that left her off guard. Natalie McNally was more than just a name in a case file. She was a daughter, a sister, and a friend. A woman with a career, a family, and dreams of her own. Despite living with diabetes for years, she had built an independent life. She loved animals, music, and her family. And she was expecting a baby. Little did she know that Christmas 2022 would not become the cherished memory her family had hoped for. Instead, it became the moment they lost a daughter, a sister, and an unborn child. Stephen McCullagh received a mandatory life sentence for murder. At the time the source material was recorded, a minimum term before parole eligibility had not yet been set. Prosecutors recommended a range of 27 to 35 years. But whatever the final sentence, it cannot restore what Natalie lost. It cannot bring her back to that home, nor can it restore the future she had envisioned with baby Dean, or erase her family's pain. All that remains is the truth. A truth that took years to come to light. A truth once hidden behind a YouTube screen. But ultimately, that screen could not conceal it forever. For there are lies crafted to deceive, and there is evidence uncovered to expose them. On the night of December 18, 2022, Thousands of people thought they were watching a man play video games at home. In reality, they were looking at a digital mask. And hidden behind that mask was a crime that Stephen McCullagh ultimately could not conceal. Natalie lost her future. But her story remains. And perhaps the most important thing we can do with stories like this is to remember that behind every case, there is more than just a name, a timeline, or a verdict. There is a human being, a family, a life, and a future that should have unfolded but will now never come to pass. Remember Natalie McNally not merely as a crime victim. Remember her as Natalie, as Nats, as an only daughter, as a sister, cherished by her brothers, as a woman preparing to become a mother, and as a human being who deserved to live her life to the fullest. Her story came to an end on a December night, but the truth of what happened that night broke through the screen, pierced the lies, and finally reached the courtroom. And that is something no fake live stream could ever change. If you are interested in true crime cases, evidence-based investigations, and objective analysis of how cases are solved, please subscribe and follow the channel to join us in exploring future case files.